go. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our Aquarium's Online Academy. My name is Talia. I'm from our Education Department. I'm excited to share a little bit of my morning with you. So today, we're going to be doing some exploring today. We're going to be using some of our kind of exhibits in the aquarium to kind of explore around some different habitats today. So I hope you guys are ready to join me. Now, if you have questions during our program today, you are welcome to ask them. And we can do that two different ways depending on when you're watching this program. If you're watching this live on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, you can text in those questions live. I'll try to answer them as best I can, and that number is down below on your screen right there, right there. 562-286-1838. Again, that's 562-286-1838 if you want to text in any questions live. If you're watching this later, or if you have a question, you're like, oh man, I really wish I asked Miss Talia that earlier this morning. You can still ask those questions. We just ask that you email us instead. And that email address is down below. It is live@lbaop.org. So those are two ways to interact with us depending on when you're watching this program. So today we're going to be exploring some different habitats today. We're going to be exploring two different habitats today. And the first one I kind of wanted to explore is one that's a little bit closer to home, at least where I am here in Long Beach, California. And we're going to be exploring some kelp forests first. So that's kind of what's going on behind me here. By the way, I'm not alone in the studio. I have Miss Saraya with me, and she is changing all the magic behind me. So she's helping me out in the studio with my my visual aids. So this is kind of what kelp looks like in the ocean. You got the sun coming down, you got the kelp swaying in the motion of the ocean here. But I wanted to kind of hop into one of our blue cavern, one of our exhibits here, just to take a little bit more of a closer look at sort of what we might find in a kelp forest. So I'm going to give you a moment or two to make some observations, and I'll have us hop into that exhibit in just a moment here. But we can enjoy all the beautiful kelp swaying in the ocean as we get that set up. I always think it looks like a beautiful rainforest. It actually has layers like a rainforest, so we should probably talk about that too. But yeah. All right. Okay. So this is one of our exhibits here in our aquarium. This is our blue cavern exhibit. It's based off of a dive site in Catalina. Comes a Garibaldi. Boop. Saying hello to that giant sea bass. I'm going to get out of the way so you can check out this exhibit a little bit more. And we'll take a moment or two to make some observations. So take a moment, just kind of see what you see. What do you notice? Does anything stand out to you? Does anything surprise you? And again, you're welcome to text in those observations if you'd like to that number. Again, let's see if I can remember it. 562-286-1838. Did I get it? I did. I'm very proud of myself. Yay. All right. So yeah, you are welcome to text in said observations. I'm going to take a moment to make some observations of my own. Let's see. What do we notice about this kelp forest home for our animals? Ooh, we had a question come in about what the orange fish is. So that is called a Garibaldi. There's a couple in on our screen now, kind of down below there. And that is actually the California State Marine fish. Yeah, that's what they look like up close. I like that their tail looks like a heart. And they're pretty feisty, as you could see, even in just the couple moments we were watching this video here. They can be really territorial. They have a little spot or so that is their home base, and they will definitely have no problem getting up to animals that are much bigger than them. They say, "Excuse me, you are in my spot." So yeah, that's called a Garibaldi. But they definitely do stand out in our kelp forest here, because a lot of times when we think about animals living in a particular home, sometimes we think about camouflage, right? We think about animals to kind of match their surroundings. So in this case, you might have some green animals, you might have some kind of a muted color, some brown, some beiges, some gray, some neutral colors. But the Garibaldi definitely stands out with their bright orange. And sometimes animals use brighter colors as kind of a warning sign. Sometimes they'll be like, hey, stay away, by being kind of bright and flashy instead of we have some very feisty caraballi in our video today. Uh, Ooh, that's another great question. We had a great question about how the seaweed, because it looks like somebody made the observation that the seaweed looks like it's growing out of the rocks here. I can kind of see how you can see that. So you might think like, it looks like it's coming out of kind of a rock, hole in the rock over there, or kind of it's maybe kind of tucked behind the rock down there. So it's not that it's necessarily growing out of the rock, it's kind of stuck to the rock. And on the bottom of kelp has kind of a lot of similar parts to a flower that we have on land, but instead of having roots and all the nutrients, it kind of has just a clump, kind of anchor it into the rock, and it's called the holdfast. Actually, have one here in the studio, so let me get it up on my document camera over here. I'm very glad I set that up. We were just talking about, I should set this camera up just in case I need it. And what do you know? It turns out I do. So this is what it looks like on the bottom. So they'll have this kind of anchor point, this sort of clump that would stick. Let's have my hand be the rock there. It'll just kind of stick to the rock there and kind of anchor it in, so all the rest of the kelp would go up from that. But that's what it's kind of holding onto the rock with. So yeah, but I can see how you can say that it definitely looks like it's growing out of the rock here. So they have a really good solid kind of a glued on point that the kelp is sitting on the rock. Yeah. Good question. Good observation. We'll kind of hop back into Blue Cabin for a moment or two. Let me know if you have any other. Ooh, that's a fish right up at the camera. Oh my goodness. If you have any more observations, I definitely noticed there's different sizes and shapes of fish. And they kind of tend to be in particular places. So remember I said a lot of times the kelp forest reminds me of a rainforest on land. So it has different layers. You have animals that like to be at the bottom, animals that like to be in the middle, animals that like to be way up at the tippy top where all the sunlight comes down. Very good, my friends. And speaking of kelp being kind of like a plant, but not quite like a plant, it is an algae. So it's similar to a plant, but it's a little bit simpler. So like we said before, it doesn't have roots on the bottom like a flower does. It instead has that kind of that clump of spaghetti, that hold fast. It's gonna grow all the way up towards the surface there. It does have something similar to a stem on a flower. It has, we call it a stipe. It's kind of this long bit in the middle there. And then instead of leaves, it has these things called blades. But just like a plant on land, it is going to be getting its energy from the sun. So it is going to be using photosynthesis to get its energy inside and do all the good stuff that all the energy is going to do and help it grow really, really tall up to the surface. So kelp actually grows taller than the water is high. It flops over on its side. It keeps growing horizontally, so it can actually grow an amazing 2 feet in a day. Ooh, and I actually noticed, you can see in this video, do we notice there's like these little round parts here? They almost look like little buoys or little floaties, and that's actually kind of their purpose. So kelp has all these little round things here, little balls. These are called nematocysts, and they help basically act as a floaty. They are filled with air, they're filled with a gas, and they help that kelp kind of float and stay nice and upright in the water there. So yeah, kelp is really, really cool. It's simple in a way, but it's complicated. But yeah, I really like pointing out the parts of kelp. So now that we've learned a little bit more about kind of what kelp is, that kind of basis, that kind of foundation of our kelp fish, let's explore a little bit about some animals that live in the kelp forest. So, Miss Ray, I'm wondering, do we have a picture of a fuzzy friend that lives in the kelp forest? A fuzzy friend. All right, she's gonna go look for a. Ooh, she read my mind. She got the right fuzzy friend I was thinking of. Ta-da! They're so cute. So, otters are a friend that lives in the kelp forest. And they are very, very fuzzy furry. They have very thick fur. They have about 1 million hairs in a square inch. So if you make a little circle with your fingers and you put it see if I can get in my back. Beep, on, beep, there, on an otter. You could count up to 1,000,000 hairs just in that one little tiny spot on an otter. So they have really thick fur to help them keep warm in some of the colder waters where they live. We have pretty cold water in our kelp forest. Some different types of otters live up towards Alaska, which is pretty cold. So that fur helps them keep warm in their nice cold waters. And they love to eat food as well. They eat 1/4 of their body weight every single day. I'm going to get out of the way of this cuteness. Actually, I can stand in this little black part over here on the side. This friend is munching on some shrimp there, it looks like. They'll kind of lie on their backs or use their tummy as a dining room table and munch on all sorts of different types of food. They will sometimes also use tools to eat. So they'll grab, if they're trying to get something really hard out of a shell to eat, like a clam, they might pick up a special rock or their favorite rock, kind of smash it together, break open that clam to eat all the yummy meat that's inside. Now, one of otter's favorite foods that live in the kelp forest, or I should say is another animal that lives in the kelp forest, which is pretty spiky, and sometimes you might see them as purple as well. So this is a purple sea urchin to be specific, and this is another animal that lives in the kelp forest. Now, their favorite food is actually the kelp itself. This one's resting on a kelp blade. You have a really nice view of kind of the texture of that blade for this type of seaweed. And then there's that little air bladder I was talking about before that lets the kelp kind of float up towards the surface. So urchins are kind of vegetarians. They love to eat seaweed. They love to eat kelp. And this was an issue when we had otters hunted for their fur. A long time ago, we really wanted to have fur for coats and for hats, and we didn't have a lot of otters out there in the world. And what that meant is because there weren't otters eating urchins, all of a sudden there were lots of urchins, and because there were lots of urchins, they were munching on a lot of kelp, a lot of algae. So all of a sudden, we didn't have a lot of great kelp forests out there anymore. We just had a lot of sand and a lot of urchins, boop, boop, like this friend over there. So thankfully, with some laws in place to help protect otters, their numbers are coming back. We're starting to see that balance kind of coming back into place. So there hopefully are enough otters out there to eat lovely urchins, to make sure that our kelp forests stay nice and healthy. So all the other animals that we saw that call out their home, all the fish, there's all sorts of other sea lions, all sorts of friends that called the kelp forest their home, have a home and a nice healthy home to hang out in. And otters can actually eat so many urchins that their teeth turn purple. So it's kind of like when you have a lollipop or a popsicle as a kid and your lips turn blue and your tongue turns blue and you go home and your mom's like, I know what you had for a snack. That's kind of what happens with the otter's teeth as their teeth start turning purple, the ones that really love to eat urchins, which I think is kind of funny, but kind of awesome. Yeah, so those are some of our friends that live in our kelp forest. Now, I did mention we're exploring 2 habitats today, so I want to kind of take a break from our habitat that's a little close to our home, a little bit colder, and I want to go somewhere a little bit warmer because it's pretty cold, I think, in the kelp forest. So let's jump into somewhere a little bit warmer, and just like we were doing before, let's take a moment to make some observations. Again, friends, if you have any questions, if you're curious about anything, please feel free to text in those questions or make those observations using that text line. So again, that's 562-286-1838. And thank you so much for my friends who have texted in some questions already. So I'm going to get out of the way so you can look at our next habitat, which is a coral reef. And again, what do we notice? Does anything stand out? Is anything different from the kelp forest we were looking at earlier? Oh my goodness. Great question. We had a question asking how many fish are here. There are a lot. I am trying to think in my head. I believe there are over 1,000 fish here, and there's like almost, I want to say like 90 different types of fish in here. There's a lot of friends who visit this exhibit. So that might be a difference that you're noticing. It is busy in here. There are lots more fish, or lots more nooks and crannies for them to kind of wiggle in and out of. Ever look downs coming by, those really shiny fish that look like kind of like tinfoil. sorts of friends. Great observation. But yeah, this is one of our biggest exhibits here at the aquarium. It's like the whole middle of a gallery that you can see from a couple different windows. But yeah, there are a lot of fish friends in there. A lot of, again, same as before, a lot of different shapes and sizes. There's lots of little fish. There's some medium fish. There's a couple big fish in there. There's even some sharks in there. So I'll try to see if I can point one out in our video here. And if not, I'm definitely going to go talk about some sharks a little bit later on. I also noticed that the corals are different colors as well. I see some yellows and some greens. So there's not only different colors of fish, there's different colors of corals. Ooh, there's a stingray that just came by. Ooh, hello. Very cool. Ooh, and a unicorn fish with a horn on its head. Nice. I swear these fish kind of know where the camera is sometimes, because there's definitely a few of them that definitely come to say hi and check it out, especially the giant sea bass in our exhibit from earlier. They kind of mug the camera every once in a while, which is kind of it's funny. It's not so funny when you're trying to teach and you're hoping to see more than a fish eye, but very cool. So excellent observations, my friends. We noticed that there were lots and lots of fish in there. There's lots and lots of coral here as well. It is a busy place here on the coral reef. I like to think about a coral habitat or home. It's kind of almost like looking at a big underwater city, and then the coral are kind of the foundation of they're kind of the buildings that all these fish are kind of living in, swimming in. Some of them build their homes in these corals. Some of them lay their eggs in these corals. So yeah, it really is kind of looking like at a really bustling city underwater. So I want to take a moment before we get too excited talking about some of the animals that live here. I want to take a moment to figure out, what is coral? What is this stuff that we're looking at in the background here? But by the way, if I'm remembering my exhibit correctly, this piece of coral right here, I think we've had since the beginning of the aquarium. So this is a really old piece of coral here, which is really, really cool that we still have it with us. But yeah, coral can live a really, really, really long time. It grows very slowly, though. It only grows like an inch or two in the most ideal of conditions. But yeah, what is coral? What is this? Is it an animal? Is it a plant? Is it a rock? Is it both? So let's take a moment to explore coral together, and maybe if we zoom in a little bit, we can get a little bit of a better idea, of what is it. So this is what coral looks like a little bit more up close. I'll get out of the way so you can see the image a little bit better. And when I'm looking at this, when I'm focusing on just one little stalk right there, that kind of reminds me of another animal that lives in the ocean. It kind of reminds me of a sea anemone, like this friend over here. So that's kind of what it reminds me of. And that is an animal, and coral is actually an animal as well. So we call this one little part of the coral the polyp. That's the animal part of coral. Now, and when we're looking at coral, we're kind of looking at, keeping our city analogy in mind, we're kind of looking at an apartment complex. So there's all these teeny tiny little holes in coral, and all the little polyps are going to live, one polyp is going to live in each little hole, all in one big structure. Now, we've zoomed in a little bit more to the coral. We can still kind of see the polyps here, but hold on. What is these kind of dots that are in the tissue, in the kind of the skin of the coral polyp? So corals don't live alone. They actually kind of have a roommate that lives with them, and it is actually an algae again. It is actually kind of a very simple plant-like friend, and that this little guy has a very, very big name, and it is called zooxanthellae. So this is what this is, and this actually helps out the coral. They kind of have a symbiotic relationship, so they have kind of a win-win situation. The zooxanthellae gets, this is how you spell it. It is very, very long. Ooh, I'm proud of my pointing right now. Yay. Little goals, little goals. All right, that's how we spell this really big name of this little tiny friend. So the zooxanthellae gets a home in the coral polyp, and then the coral polyp gets from the zooxanthellae, kind of acts as their personal chef, and they provide sugar for the coral polyp to eat. The coral polyp can also kind of catch, just like an anemone can catch food with its wiggly tentacles, they can also catch little plankton with these little doodly bits there, but they're getting a lot of their food, a lot of their energy from the little algae that lives inside. And now different algae are different colors, and that's how we get different colors of corals that we see throughout the ocean, just like this beautiful exhibit over here. There are lots of different colors that we didn't see before. I see some greens still, but there's some purples and some like orangey pinks back there. There's all sorts of beautiful colors of coral that we can see. And I love all the different shapes too. There's one that looks like lettuce. There's some that look like little fingers. Oh my goodness. There's some that look like antlers. Right there. So yeah, there are lots of different friends that call the coral their home. So let's explore some of them together. And I actually wanted to explore first a very colorful fish that lives in the coral reef, that has a very unusual mouth. Ooh, very good at reading my mind today. So this is, actually, I'll get out of the way because it is a big picture. This is the friend I wanted to talk about first. And this is a parrotfish, or a type of parrotfish. This is, I believe, if we want to be particular about it, it's a bicolored parrotfish, question mark? I think. That's okay. Anyways, it is a beautiful fish. It definitely lives up to its name in a couple of ways. We think about parrots being really, really colorful birds. This is a very, very colorful fish. There is teal and like hot pink and purple and yellow and all sorts of beautiful colors on this fish. Now, the other thing we think about when we think about, I kind of gave you a big hint, but the other thing that we think about when you think about parrots is you think about their mouth, right? This one doesn't have wings like a parrot. That would be cool too. But their mouth, let's see. I did it. Right there. That's kind of where they also get their name of a parrotfish. So they have a really strong mouth that acts like a beak, just like a parrot. And what they use this for is to help them eat, obviously, but it helps them eat the, this one has a beautiful smile. This has some pearly whites here. They use this to eat coral. Now, they're not trying to eat the hard kind of skeleton that the coral has around itself. They're trying to get all the little squishy polyps inside all the little anemone-looking friends. So they're going to use this hard beak to crack open that, right there as well, to crack open that hard skeleton, get all the squishy polyps inside. They're still going to ingest some of the coral skeleton. Now, the other thing that is interesting about parrotfish is when all that comes out the other end, it's kind of ground up that coral really, really finely, and it essentially produces sand. So we can thank parrotfish for a portion of the sand that you might find on a nice tropical beach, which is mostly made out of ground up coral. Some of that comes from our parrotfish friend munching on some coral. So I think that's awesome that a fish can help us produce essentially the sand that hangs out on nice tropical beaches. So yeah, parrotfish, very interesting friend that lives in the coral reefs. The other friend I wanted to talk about today, we have a little bit more time to talk about one more friend. Again, if you have any questions today, please feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to answer questions. Is a shark that lives on the coral reef that has a little bit of a unusual name for a stripy animal. Ha! All right, my friends. So this is a zebra shark. It's a zebra shark. Ta-da! Now, you might be looking at this and saying, Miss Talia, zebras have stripes, and this friend is covered in polka dots. So what gives? What is going on? Now, this is named after a little bit more what it looks like when it is a baby. So when it is a baby, this is a teenager. It has stripes. And as the stripes grow with the shark, they stretch. And they stretch and they stretch. You can kind of see there's spots and stripes on this kind of juvenile one, on this teenager one. But as they stretch and stretch and stretch, they start to be not stripes anymore, and they start to be polka dots. So scientists saw these sharks when they were babies, and they're like, aha, it is a zebra shark. And yes, we did it. We named the shark. Woohoo. And then they grew up and they're like, oh, that doesn't look like a zebra anymore. But that's okay. And also, ooh, this is what they look like when they're babies. They're so cute. So you can see a lot better of a zebra-looking coloration to their body there. So, yeah, scientists saw that. They're like, yeah, zebra shark. And then they grew up and they're like, oh, not so much. So then the stripes stretch, stretch, stretch. You can kind of see the lines kind of where the stripes used to be, but they're breaking up into polka dots. And this shark is a really long shark. They get to be like 7 feet. A lot of it is that big long tail we saw. Their tail in this picture is like going down behind them there. But yeah, they'll stretch completely into polka dots. In Australia, it's called a leopard shark, which makes a little bit more sense for what they look like now as adults. But we already had a leopard shark here in California, so couldn't call it that. So that's why we stuck with zebra shark after what it looks like here as a baby. This is the leopard shark we have in California. So it would be way too confusing to have two sharks with the same name, especially here at the aquarium, because they've said, go feed the leopard shark. You're like, well, hold on, which one do you mean? Do you mean the one in the kelp forest? Or do you mean the one in the warmer tropical exhibits? So yeah, this is a zebra shark, but really interesting shark. Not just in terms of it's kind of funny the way it looks like as an adult versus what it's named, but its body shape is a little bit different too. It doesn't have that kind of traditional football shape that we think about when we think about sharks. Its body is a little bit flatter on the bottom, which is great for kind of napping on the bottom as well, taking a rest. But you might notice their mouth is a little bit flatter too. So they love to munch on things on the bottom as well. So they're looking for clams, crabs, snails, things like that, little guys in the sand to eat, and those teeth are going to help them kind of munch up things in the sand that are great to eat. They're not quite flat, but they're not quite super pointy either. They're kind of in between, and that helps them eat a lot of their yummy food on the bottom. This one's taking a wonderful nap. Rest on the sand there. You can see their gills moving as well there as well. So they're drawing in water from this little hole right behind their eye, and it's going boop to their gills over there. Very cool. So yeah, zebra shark is another great friend that lives in the coral reef. So I think we're almost about out of time for our exploration today, but I hope you had fun exploring 2 different habitats with me. So let's see if we can do a quick recap. We explored the kelp forest first. We explored the kelp forest. We saw that it's really tall. It goes all the way up to the surface here. It is an algae, so it's a little bit simpler than a plant. Doesn't have roots on the bottom, has that holdfast, has that little clump on the bottom to help it anchor into places like the rocks. Lots of animals call it their home, like sea lions and sea otters, which you talked about. Sea otters, really fuzzy friends, really cool fur, very, very thick, really smart, using tools to help them eat, cracking open things in hard shells. They love to eat urchins. Urchins love. So they kind of keep everybody in balance. Otters eat urchins, urchins eat kelp, but there is not enough urchins to mow down the kelp forest, hopefully, or it's getting kind of back into that balance again, thanks to some laws that protect otters. We hopped into our warm tropical reefs. We looked at corals. We figured out, what is coral? It's an animal, but it has a plant roommate called the zooxanthellae. Boop, right there. And they kind of work together as well. So the zooxanthellae gives food to the coral polyp. Polyp gives a home. Different zooxanthellae live in different corals. They are different colors of corals. They're pretty fun. We talked about our parrotfish, how they munch on corals. We talked about our zebra sharks and all the wonderful friends that call the coral reef their home. So I hope you had fun exploring with me this morning. I had fun exploring with you. Thank you for texting in your questions. I'm very happy to answer them. If you would like to ask more questions, you are welcome to do so. We just ask that at this point, since we're going to be going off the air, to email us and say, glad I'm still here in spirit. Woo! All right. So you can email us live at lbaop.org if you do have any further questions. Also, if there are any teachers watching with us this morning, if you wouldn't mind texting in the number of students that are watching with you, that just gets us a little better idea on what our viewership numbers are. That kind of helps us out with collecting data for these programs. But again, thank you so much for coming and spending your morning with me. And we'll see you next time on another edition of the Aquarium's Online Academy on Wednesday. So again, thanks for coming. See you later. Have a great rest of your morning. Bye, everyone.